Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix, and as you may or may not know, I recently posted a video on Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and now that I have completed the book, I'm going to conclude my discussion of Nietzsche, and specifically this book. But before I do, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and share my videos on YouTube. It definitely helps me a lot, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. So I will admit, Nietzsche is a very difficult thinker for me. There are certainly many books that I have read that I find difficult for a variety of reasons. You get this a lot in classic literature, for instance, where the language is really dense and they use a vernacular that we're not as much familiar with. And then there are translated texts, which can also be complicated. And generally, there's complicated texts in general by way of just the content itself. But Nietzsche has always been a thinker that I find worth revisiting, and in fact, I had just read Beyond Good and Evil again for the second time, and I think that it was worth it. Now, what can I say about Nietzsche? Well, certainly as a kind of spoiler or what do you call it? Warning. I would say that Nietzsche is misogynist in some of his writings, and I don't like that. And in fact, when I was reading Beyond Good and Evil again, I got frustrated with the book and put it aside for a while because I didn't want to deal with that. So we could acknowledge that Nietzsche has flaws. He certainly has flawed ideas about nobility and what it means to be noble, often the idea of a kind of aristocracy and the idea that some people are better than others. Nietzsche attacks egalitarianism, for instance, and all of that gets complicated pretty fast because it forms the basis of politics as we know it. But even with all of that being the case, all of the flaws, I would say Nietzsche is still very much worth reading. One of the chapters that stood out to me was actually his chapter on what it means to be noble. And if I was going to summarize what it means to me and what it means for me, I would say that being noble is a very difficult thing to do, but it's something you should strive to do if you are going to become your greatest self. I am charitable towards Nietzsche and assume less of a kind of dominant, kind of aggressive attitude, and more interpret it as improving yourself and doing what you can to aspire for greatness with your art, with your life, with your actions, with community, and things like that. But you can interpret it many different ways, and it's hard to say exactly what he means. Now, I don't think it's an easy book, as I have highlighted, but there is a way in which there are many aspects that you might find inspiring. He has a specific idea that a person who strives to be noble is therefore reverent towards themselves, and I think that's an interesting idea. There was another idea about how people who are sad betray themselves by way of their sadness and by way of their happiness, so to speak, and I thought that was interesting because it brought to mind the idea of our limitations by way of the way in which we express emotions and how sometimes people read into that and it can be a difficult thing for us because we're betraying ourselves to other people. Now, overall, Nietzsche's project, especially in this book Beyond Good and Evil, is focused on thinking about morality and the difficulties with morality. And while there are a lot of claims that can be made about morality in general, I would say that Nietzsche is trying to create his own morality and construct his own way of looking at the world. And I think that takes a lot of bravery. And I think it's a difficult thing to do. So, what is Nietzsche's style? Well, Nietzsche writes in an aphoristic style. This book actually reminds me a lot of the free flow of ideas that you find in his other book, his notebook, The Will to Power. But the ideas in this book are a little bit more refined and a little bit more robust. And so, yeah, I would encourage reading the book. As you may or may not know, the main thesis is getting us to think beyond our constrained notions and ideals and ideologies. And honestly, as a thinker and as a philosopher and as a writer, this inspires me very greatly because it gets me to think seriously about the limitations of a constructed morality, of a constructed ideology, of a constructed reality that we are handed, and really encourages us to try and find our own way and our own methods of living in the world. And I think that takes a lot of bravery, and I have thus found a lot of inspiration from that. And I hope that you find inspiration in it too. So yeah, find Nietzsche online at Amazon or at your local bookstore or wherever you get books. I highly recommend this book. And yeah, I would assume that that probably covers a good percentage of what Nietzsche talks about. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this talk and check him out. If you're interested in finding my books, you can find them on my author page at amazon.com/author/Phoenix_rises. And yeah, like, subscribe, and share. This is Phoenix, and thank you for your time.